Hello and welcome to this Kuits Briefing. I'm Robert Levy, Executive Partner for Kuits, law firm in Manchester, and I'm joined today by Felicity Tulloch, who is head of the leisure team at Kuits. Felicity, would you tell us a little bit before we begin about the type of work that your team is doing for operators in the leisure industry?
Yes, hi. We act for a wide range of hospitality industries, so from bars, pubs, restaurants, nightclubs, theatres and cinemas up and down the country, obtaining their premises licences to enable them to operate.
And COVID-19 must have affected your clients, if anything more than any, a cataclysmic impact on the leisure industry and very sudden hammer coming down on the industry. What have you been seeing over the last 8-10 weeks?
Yeah, it's been obviously devastating to the industry as a whole. Visitor numbers and customer numbers were starting to decline anyway in March, as I think the scale of the pandemic was starting to become known. That was then compounded by the fact that in mid-March the government advised people not to visit crowded places and not go to bars and restaurants. And then on top of that, about a week after that, there was the lockdown when it was banned and the pubs and restaurants had to close. And they've remained shut ever since. And it's been a desperate time for the industry, without a doubt.
And have they managed to access government support schemes? I presume those have been essential for them.
Yes, they have. I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is a willingness amongst all stakeholders in the industry to try and work together. So landlords, by and large, not always, but by and large, have been quite understanding, dealing with rent deferrals and other rent breaks, payment breaks, for example. So that's obviously been a huge help. Local authorities have been really helpful. Almost immediately, we saw nationwide a willingness amongst them to defer fees for the annual fee for a premises licence, renewal fees, for example, and sometimes they run into the thousands of pounds. And so when an industry doesn't have an income, not to have to pay those sorts of outgoings has been very helpful. But I think there was a real step change when the furlough scheme was announced. I think that enabled the industry to take stock, have a breather, mothball their businesses, and then try to look to the future. Obviously, there's now an end date for the furlough scheme that's on the horizon, and the suggestion that in a couple of months' time, employers will be asked to share the burden for paying their staff with the government. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how that might play out. If, when the furlough scheme tapers down, bars and restaurants aren't open, I wonder whether many will be in a position to help pay, or whether we might see some large-scale redundancies at that point.
And what about insurers? We've seen some noise in the press about business interruption insurance claims being knocked back almost as a matter of course by some insurers. Have we been encountering that as well?
Yeah, we have. Lots of our clients had what they thought was an insurance policy that would protect them for this sort of event, a pandemic. But at the moment, there is a huge amount of resistance from insurance companies to pay out. So we're doing some work on behalf of some of our clients to challenge that by way of class action to see if we can get them the support that they really need.
And so here we are then, end of May. They've had a lot of time to contemplate the future and think about what might be. Of course, it's very uncertain, I suppose, not only in the period from now until we get a vaccine, but even beyond. What kind of changes do you think we're going to see?
I think in the roadmap that was released a couple of weeks ago, the hospitality sector was quite reassured that step 3, when some form of the hospitality sector might be allowed to reopen, would take place as early as July. I think they were expecting it to be on the whole slightly later than that. But without a doubt, the first premises that might be allowed to reopen will be those with outside spaces, so alfresco dining, cafes or pubs with beer gardens will be the ones who can benefit first. I think what I'd like to see is some innovative thinking from local authorities about perhaps relaxing the need for certain licences to allow operators to trade beyond their premises, take advantage hopefully of some good weather over the summer. Liverpool have just announced that the Mayor's Fund have released £450,000 to improve external dining opportunities in the city. And it would be good to see that replicated all over the country. I think it's likely to happen, but I think it'd be crucial if bars and restaurants are allowed to get back open and to really generate some income and allow people to get back to the pub this summer.
And what happens to, smaller premises where it's harder to socially distance? And what happens to nightclubs, for example, which are usually packed to the rafters?
I think it's going to be difficult, certainly for city centre, larger venues, to get back up and running in the way that they used to for some time. There are opportunities for those sorts of operators, without a doubt. Perhaps the demographic that frequents nightclubs, they're younger, they might be more risk averse, more willing to take a risk, and they may want to, as soon as they're able, get back into a late night bar. The other side of that, I think, presents an opportunity for operators of neighbourhood bars, local pubs, perhaps in the suburbs. I think a lot will hinge on consumer confidence. So I think it will take a while for people perhaps to get back into a city centre, but they might be more willing to go to a local pub or restaurant. They might be able to walk there rather than get on public transport, for example. And so I think there's certainly opportunities for them. The difficulty is, though, with neighbourhood bars, for example, they are, by their very definition, located near residents, and that often causes an issue with noise nuisance. And equally, residential areas are often quite strictly regulated when it comes to licensing. Often those areas are subject to policies which mean that new licenses can't be granted, or those that already operate there can't develop their business. So we're going to be doing a bit of work around that to see if we can get some flexibility into those areas where those policies apply, because I think there'll be a real demand for hospitality in neighbourhood areas.
And presumably you are able to help operators formulate these plans by reference to what you're seeing licensing authorities accepting in other places. Is that right? Yeah,
we act for operators up and down the country, and there's definitely a movement by them to be as helpful as possible. So we'll continue to keep speaking with them to see what can be done. And
I've always found, both in speaking to you and speaking to your clients, that it's a very collaborative industry, that competitors speak to each other regularly. I know that you've been hosting a regular roundtable for operators. Have you been finding that interesting? Have you found things coming out of that of benefit to all? And if there is anybody listening to this who is an operator who might want to join in with that kind of forum, is it available to people to join?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're totally right. One of the good things to have come out of the pandemic, I think, from a hospitality sector perspective, is the partnership working that happened almost overnight. They, as a group, have been very open to sharing best practice, speaking to one another, lobbying the government, lobbying local authorities to try and get a good deal for the sector because they've been so hard hit. Yeah, and as you say, we've been hosting a weekly leisure lunch every Thursday, 12 o'clock, just for an hour. It's open to any hospitality operator, wherever they're based throughout the country. And it's just a forum where people can talk about the past, their plans for the future, and think about how they might operate over the next few months.
Well, if anybody is interested in joining those lunchtime briefings, then if you go to www.kuits.com, Kuits.com, then there will be more details there. Felicity, thank you, very informative. I'm sure you're going to have your work cut out over the next few weeks and months, but I'm sure it'll also be very challenging. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll be back with another update soon.